It's sad to think that human beings would go through life with fixed ideas, programming, and they never change. And they're not aware. They're just not aware of what's going on. Very religious people, some of them, but no awareness. I really meant that. You might as well have been a block of wood. You might as well have been a rock. Really. A talking, walking, thinking machine, computer. That's not human. Puppet, jerked around by all kinds of things. Press a button, you'll get the reaction. I told you that yesterday. You could almost predict to the nth degree how a human being is going to react. Just study the person, for a day, and I'll tell you exactly how he or she is going to react. And sometimes write it on a piece of paper for my therapy group and say, so-and-so is going to start the session. So-and-so will reply. There the machines, true to plan, go on. That's painful. They're not aware. And don't listen to the people who say to you, forget yourself, go out in love to others. Don't listen to them. They're all wrong. The worst thing you can do is to forget yourself when you go out to others. Go out in your so-called helping attitude. You know, this was brought home to me very forcefully many years ago when I did my studies in Chicago in psychology. We had a course in counseling for priests. It was only open to priests who were actually engaged in counseling and who agreed to bring a tape to class. So we did that. Well, must have been about 20 of us. When it was my turn, I brought a cassette, a tape, to class that had engraved on it, impressed on it, an interview that I had with a young woman. Well, I took it to class, the instructor put it in a tape recorder, and we all began to hear it. After 5 minutes, as was his custom, the instructor stopped the tape. He said, "Any comments?" Someone said to me, "Why did you ask her that question?" I said, "I'm not aware that I asked any question. As a matter of fact, I'm quite sure I did not ask any question." He said, "Oh, no, you did. See, I was quite sure because I was consciously following the method of Carl Rogers, person-oriented, non-directive. You don't ask questions, you don't interrupt, you don't give advice, etc. So I was very aware that I mustn't ask questions. All right, there was a bit of a dispute between the two of us, and the instructor said, "Why don't we play that again?" So we played that again and heard it. And there, to my horror, was a whopping big question, as tall as the Empire State Building. A huge question, you couldn't miss it. Now, you know, the interesting thing was that I had heard that question 3 times. The first time, presumably, when I asked it. The second time, when I listened to the tape in my room, because I wanted to take a good tape to class, see? And the third time, when I heard it in the room, in the classroom, but it hadn't registered. I wasn't aware. That happens frequently in my therapy sessions or spiritual direction sessions or whatever. We tape the interview. We record it. And again and again and again, when the client listens to it, he or she says, "You know, I didn't really hear what you said in the interview. I only heard it when I listened to the tape. More interestingly, I didn't really hear what I said when we had the interview. I only heard, look what I said." Somewhat humiliatingly, I sometimes discover what I said when I'm listening to the tape with her. That's shocking. It's shocking to discover that I'm saying things, for heaven's sake, in a therapy session that I'm not aware of. the full import of which only dawns on me later. You call that human? Forget yourself and go out to others? Well, I had an even more shattering experience that morning, because when we listened to the whole tape, the instructor said, "Any comments?" One of the priests, a 50-year-old man, whom I took a liking to, he'd sit in one corner of the room, smoking his pipe. He said to me, "Tony, I'd like to ask you a personal question. Would that be all right?" I said, "Yeah, go ahead. If I don't want to answer it, I won't." "What's the personal question?" He said, "This woman you're interviewing, is she pretty?" Now, you know, honest to goodness, I was at a stage of my development or undevelopment, or whatever you want to call it, where I really didn't notice if someone was good looking or not. I really didn't. It didn't matter. I mean, she was a sheep in the flock of Christ. I was the pastor. I dispensed help. Yes, I mean, it's agree. That's the way we were trained, the good old training. So I said to him, "What has that got to do with it, whether she's pretty or not?" He said, "You don't like her, do you?" "What? You don't like her, do you?" Well, hadn't ever struck me that I liked or disliked people, or mostly occasional powerful likes and dislikes would register in consciousness, but the other ones wouldn't. It was mostly neutral. I said, "What makes you say that?" He said, "It's the tape." I said, "You mean you get that from the interview?" He said, "Yes, would you like me to show you that?" I said, "Yes, I'd be happy to." We went through that tape again, and he said, "Listen to your voice here, how sweet it has become. You're irritated, aren't you?" I was. I was only becoming aware of it right there. And look what you're doing here, non-directively, for heaven's sake. You know what I was saying to her? I was saying, "Don't come back," but I wasn't aware of it. And he said, "She's a woman. She'll have picked this up." They say women have a sixth sense. Yes. Remember the guy who's supposed to have had a sixth sense, but he lacked all the other five? So he said, "You're saying, don't come back, don't come back." He said, "When are you supposed to meet her next?" I said, "Well, next Wednesday." He said, "My guess is she won't come back." She didn't. I waited for 1 week, she didn't come. Waited for another Wednesday, she didn't come. Then I called her. I broke one of my rules. I called her. Generally don't. Let them take the initiative. Don't be a rescuer. But I said to her, "You remember that tape you allowed me to make for the class?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "You know, it was a great help because they pointed out all kinds of things to me." I didn't tell her what. That would help me to be more effective. So if you'd care to come back, you're free to. I think I'd be somewhat more effective. She said, "All right, I'll come back." She did. The dislike was still there, hadn't gone away, but it wasn't coming in the way. That's important. What you are aware of, you are in control of. What you are not aware of is in control of you. You are always a slave to what you're not aware of. When you're aware of it, you're free from it. It's there, but you're not affected by it. You're not controlled by it. You're not enslaved by it. That's the difference. Awareness. Awareness, awareness, awareness. What they trained us to do at that course was to become participant observers. Like I'd be talking to you, to put it somewhat graphically, I'd be talking to you, and I'd be here talking to you, and I'd be out there watching you and watching me. When I'm listening to you, it is infinitely more important for me to listen to me than to listen to you. See if you could get that one. When I'm listening to you, it's infinitely more important for me to listen to me than to listen to you. Of course it's important to listen to you, but it's even more important that I be listening to me. Or else I won't be hearing you. Or else I'll be distorting everything you say. Or else I'll be coming at you from my own conditioning. Or else I'll be reacting to you in all kinds of ways, from my insecurities, from my need to manipulate you, from my desire to succeed, from my irritations and feelings that I may not be aware of. So it's frightfully important that I be listening to me when I'm listening to you. That's what they were training us to do. It was a training in awareness. And as I shall tell you this morning, how important it is that you be listening to yourself, observing yourself, watching yourself constantly as you react to life and to people, to the world. So important. How does one do this? Does one do this consciously? You know, I said to you, observe yourself the way you would be observing someone else. That needs a little explanation. You don't always have to imagine yourself hovering up somewhere there in the air, looking at yourself. No. You know, to give you an idea, a rough idea of what I'm talking about, imagine a good driver is driving a car. He's concentrating on what you're saying. In fact, he's having an argument with you. That's how much he's concentrating. But he's perfectly aware of all the road signals. And the moment anything untoward happens, the moment there's any untoward sound or noise or bump, he hears it at once. He says, "You sure you closed that door back there?" How did he get that? He was aware. He was alert. The focus of his attention was on the conversation, on the argument. But his awareness was more diffuse. He was taking in all kinds of things. What I'm advocating here is not concentration. That's not important. Lots of meditative techniques inculcate concentration. I'm wary of those things. They involve violence, and they frequently involve further programming and conditioning. What I would advocate is awareness, which is not the same as concentration at all. Concentration is a spotlight. Awareness, floodlight. You're open to anything that comes within the scope of your consciousness. Big difference. So when you're practicing awareness, you're never distracted. You may go to sleep. Go to sleep even though you're awake, which means you may turn off the awareness. Then you're asleep, even though you're talking and reading, etc. But when the awareness is turned on, there's never any distraction because you're always aware of wherever the focus of your attention happens to be. Like now I'm looking at those trees. Now I'm worrying. Was I distracted? You would have been distracted only if you were meant to concentrate on the trees. But if you're aware that you're worried, that isn't a distraction at all. Just be aware of where the focus of your attention goes. And above all, if you're practicing this, even to a limited degree, you will develop an extraordinary skill. When anything goes awry, or anything untoward happens, you'll be alerted at once. Something's going wrong. The moment any negative feeling comes into consciousness, you'll be alerted. Something going wrong. And you'll give it your attention. Something like the driver of the car. Awareness, awareness, awareness. Now, I told you that as you begin to practice self-observation, you will see yourself that you are observing you. I am observing me. Now that's a strange phenomenon. I observing me. Remember I told you yesterday, St. Teresa of Avila would say that God gave her the grace of disidentifying herself from herself. You know, little children talk that way. A 2-year-old will say, Tommy had his breakfast this morning. He doesn't say I. He says Tommy. Third person. Mystics feel that way. They don't feel I have a problem. They feel Tommy has a problem. That's extraordinary. They have disidentified from themselves, and at last they're at peace. This is the grace that St. Teresa of Avila was talking about. This is the I that the mystic masters of the East are constantly urging people to discover, and of the West too, because you can count Meister Eckhart among them. They're urging people to discover the I. Who's I? What's I? Now the important thing is not, listen to this sentence carefully, the important thing is not to know who I is or what I is. You'll never succeed. There are no words for this. The important thing is to drop the labels. As the Japanese masters, the Zen masters say, don't seek for truth, only drop your opinions, drop your theories. Don't seek for truth. Truth isn't something you seek for. If you would stop being opinionated, you would know. If you would drop your beliefs and opinions, you would know. Now something similar happens here. If you would drop your labels, you would know. What do I mean by labels? Every label you can conceive of, except perhaps human being. I am a human being, fair enough. Doesn't say very much. But when you say, I am successful, that's crazy, because success is not part of the I. Success is something that comes and goes. It could be here today and gone tomorrow. That's not I. But you said, I am a success. That's where you were in error. That's when you got plunged into darkness. You identified yourself with success. I am a failure. I am a lawyer. I am a businessman. Now, you know what's going to happen to you if you identify yourself with these things? You're going to cling to them. You're going to be worried that they may fall apart. And that's where all your suffering comes in. That's what I meant in the beginning when I said to you, if you're suffering, you're asleep. Do you want a sign that you're asleep? Here it is. You're suffering. You're asleep. Suffering is a sign that you're out of touch with the truth. Suffering is given to you that you might open your eyes to the truth, that you might understand that there is some falsehood somewhere. Just as physical pain is given to you to understand that there's a disease, there's an illness somewhere. So suffering points out that there's some falsehood somewhere. Suffering occurs when you clash with reality. When your illusion clashes with reality. When your falsehood clashes with truth, then you have suffering. Otherwise, there is no suffering. Now listen very carefully. The next few minutes, this sounds a bit pompous, but it's true. the next few minutes could be the most important minutes in the lives of some of you. If you could grasp this, you've hit upon the secret for awakening. You would be happy forever. You would never be unhappy again. Nothing, but nothing would have the power to hurt you. And I mean that. Nothing. It's like, you take black paint and throw it up in the air and keep throwing black paint in the air. The air is uncontaminated. You don't color the air black. And no matter what happens to you, you remain uncontaminated. You remain at peace. There are human beings, and you know it, who have attained to this. That is what I call human, not what people are generally living. That's what I call being a human being. That's what I call natural. Not this nonsense of being a puppet, jerked about this way and that, having any event or any person tell you how to feel, and then you proceed to feel it. They call it being vulnerable. I call it being a puppet. You want to be a puppet? We press a button and you're down. You like that? So there it is. If you do not identify with any of those labels, first of all, most of your worries cease. What are you generally worried about? Later we'll talk about your fear of disease and death. But ordinarily you're worried about what's going to happen to your career. A businessman, small-time businessman kind of, 55 years old. He's sipping beer somewhere at a bar and he thinks, well, look at my classmates. They've really made it. The idiot, they've made it. What do you mean they've made it? They got their names in the newspapers? You call that made it? They got their names in the news, in the prison journal, which all the prisoners are reading? And he thinks they've made it. Successful president of a corporation. The other guy has become the chief justice, and somebody else has become this, and the other person has become that. Monkeys, all of them. Who determines what it means to be a success? The main preoccupation of society is to keep society sick. And the sooner you realize that, the better. Every one of them. Most of them. They're loony. They're crazy. You became the president of the lunatic asylum, and you're proud of it. It means nothing. It really means nothing. Being the president of a corporation has absolutely nothing to do with being awake or being happy or being a success in life. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Having a lot of money has nothing to do with being a success in life. You're a success in life when you wake up. When you don't have to apologize to anyone. When you don't have to explain anything to anyone. You don't feel the need to explain anything to anyone. You don't give a damn what anybody thinks of you or what anybody says about you. You have no worry. You're happy. Now that's what I call being a success. I don't know about you. So this poor guy is thinking sadly that he isn't a success like his classmates. Nobody has ever told him that having a good job and being famous and having a great reputation has absolutely nothing to do with happiness or success. Nothing. It's totally irrelevant. And so he's worried about what his children will think about him. What will the neighbors think about him? What will his wife think? He should have become famous. That's what your society and your culture is drilling into your head day and night, and so is mine. People who made it. Made what? made asses of themselves because they drained all their energy in getting something that was worthless. And they're frightened, and they're confused, and they're puppets like the rest. Look at them strutting across the stage. Look how upset they'd get if they had a stain on their shirt. You call that a success? Look how frightened they are at the prospect that they may not be re-elected. You call that a success? So controlled, so manipulated. These are not happy people. These are miserable people. They don't enjoy life. They're constantly tense and anxious. You call that human? And do you know why that happened? There's only one reason. They identified with some label. They identified the I. That was their error. With their money, with their job, with their profession. What about the lawyer who says to a plumber, when he's looking at the plumber's bill, he says, "Hey, you're charging nearly $200 an hour. Even I don't make that kind of money as a lawyer." And the plumber said, "Even I didn't make that kind of a money when I was a lawyer." He said, right, so you could be a plumber or a lawyer or a businessman or a priest. That does not affect essential I. That doesn't affect you. I change my profession tomorrow. That's like changing my clothes. I is untouched. Are you your clothes? Are you your name? Are you your profession? Stop identifying with that, because that will come and go. You know what happens when you really understand this? No criticism can affect you. No flattery or praise can affect you either. When someone says you're a great guy, what's he talking about? He's talking about me. He's not talking about I. I is neither great nor small. I is neither successful nor a failure. It is none of these labels. These things come and go. These things depend on the criteria that your society establishes. These things depend on your conditioning. These things depend on the mood of the person who happens to be talking to you right now. They have nothing to do with I. I is none of these labels. Me is generally selfish, foolish, childish, and a great big ass. So when you say, "You're an ass," say, "You're telling me, haha, I've known it for years." That guy there, the conditioned self, what could you expect? I've known it for years. Why did you identify with him? Silly. That isn't I, that's me. Now, here are those important minutes I was telling you about. You want to be happy uninterruptedly. Happiness is uncaused. Try to understand that. Happiness, true happiness, is uncaused. You cannot make me happy. You are not my happiness. You say to the awakened person, "Why are you happy?" And the awakened person replies, "Why not?" Happiness is our natural state. Happiness is the natural state of little children to whom the kingdom belongs. until they have been polluted and contaminated by the stupidities of our societies and our cultures. To acquire happiness, you don't have to do anything, because happiness cannot be acquired. Does anybody know why? Because you have it already. How can you acquire what you already have? Then why don't you experience it? Because you've got to drop something. You've got to drop an illusion. You don't have to add anything on to be happy. You've got to drop something. Life is easy. Life is delightful. It's only rough on your illusions. You got illusions. You got ambitions. You got greed. You got cravings. You know where they come from? From your having identified with all kinds of labels here.